Hi, everyone. I know some of the names. Welcome. Nice to see you again. So Ben Jose has recently joined Lean Institute Africa. He has been on Ben, I'm sure you're going to go into sort of detail, but he's been on a traveling frenzy this year, visiting all of these, countries and sort of immersing himself into the lean culture and environment there. So I'm very excited to hear what he has come back with from his visit to Japan and Jordan. Thanks, Ben.
Very good. Thanks, Sam, and thank you everybody for joining. Do see a few familiar names on there, and thank you for those tuning in from elsewhere in the world. And I do enjoy when these sessions are a bit of an interactive experience as we go through. Any questions that come up, put those in the chat. We'll have some time at the end, likewise, probably closer to 12:15 here in South Africa, and we'll save some of that for our discussion. So very good. As Sam mentioned, I have been on a bit of a travel frenzy this year. Thankfully, my wife has been able to join me for some of it, so it hasn't contributed too much of a disunity at the home. But it's always good and always nice to see lean in different contexts, different geographies, cultures, what have you, and especially in a business setting, but also in an organizational and educational sense as well. So we'll get into how those blend together here momentarily. To give you an idea of what we'll cover today, we'll go through some of the experiences in Japan. That was the first part of the trip. That included some learning experiences, quite unique ones at that, some leadership lessons, great mentors, and some executives that joined us on the mission as well. And then we did do a bit of work system benchmarking within manufacturing facilities and otherwise. Jordan was a fantastic privilege for me to join a mentor, Andrew Paris, and a group with MedAir, along with a few other NGOs that are there supporting the hard work going on in Jordan at the moment. So that was a Lean Greenbelt training, a great experience for a week. And then it was a fantastic opportunity, likewise, to join the FAME National Conference in the US. So it was over in Dallas, Texas last week. And that also included a visit to Toyota North American headquarters, which was a first for me. Awesome to see. It's $1 billion facility, if you can believe that. They have invested a tremendous amount of capital into that part of the world, that market, as you can imagine. So it was great to see how they're treating that side of it. And then we'll link back at the end to what we see in South Africa. Always good work to do here. As we know, sometimes frustrating, challenging, but always nice to have a refresh in terms of how we can try to influence the system, be part of the solution and not the problem. And then, as mentioned, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So about an hour and 15 minutes or so to get through the content, maybe an hour and 10 right now, and then 15 minutes or so at the end for Q&A. And a bit about the Lean Institute Africa. I know Sam gave a very quick intro there, but for those who are not familiar with Lean Institute, it is part of the Lean Global Network. We have the privilege to work with many other global organizations there, as you see on the map and on the flags. And it's a very active network. Several conferences take place over the course of the year, workshops otherwise. And I would say the main essence is how do we all share this lean thinking, this mindset of improvement? And many case studies have been coming out of that, not only in a business sense, but also organizational and otherwise likewise. So I would recommend, if you're not familiar, please do check out the Lean Global Network. Would love to share a bit more about what they do with you, along with what the Lean Institute does here locally in South Africa and around the region. All right, so let's get into it, starting with Japan. So we had a great group. This was an experience that we partnered with an organization in Mexico with. So myself and a Mexican business partner put this on, along with participants from Lithuania. One from South Africa we had. Hopefully next year we'll have more from South Africa, so keep that in mind. But really, these opportunities are a great, well, once-a-year opportunity, and for some less often than that. But they're opportunities to go see the world in a different sense. And you see it as a benchmark, and that's the word we have there. But you're able to see Toyota, because that is always a benchmark, at least in my mind, of business and how they link that to long-term mutual prosperity across the community and society, but also other suppliers, the way they treat those across the network, other learning experiences, leaders that are within that network, how they're sharing that same ideology and that mindset, that leadership philosophy. Likewise, so it really is a captivating experience. I went last time in 2018, and that has carried me through until now. So I've been delinquent, and COVID didn't help that at all, obviously, going back to Japan. But now going back, you realize just how special it is being able to step outside of your normal day-to-day and see things again in a whole new light, systems working well, people contributing to that, a whole different philosophy. We'll get into more of that essence of the Japanese culture momentarily. So to start us off with some of the learning experiences, this was quite unique, came up kind of at the last minute. There was a public holiday in Tokyo, and we had the opportunity to go to the Senkoji Temple, which was right there near the Tokyo Tower, as you can see in the background. And it was a unique opportunity with this gentleman named Shukei Matsumoto. He is a Buddhist monk. As you can see, he guided us through a whatever you want to call it, procession, a opportunity just to step back and meditate for a bit. It was quite unique there. And then he gave us a presentation, which he has actually delivered at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And he has done this around the vein of interbeing, that we're all interconnected and interdependent, all within the same type of system here and contributing to it. He has written a book, as you see in the middle there, called A Monk's Guide to a Clean House and Mind. And a few of us thought it was quite funny of a concept to have some brooms and the daily disciplines and those things linked to business, but you'd be surprised. That he said was one of the most important things you can do as a leader, is to really grasp and harness those daily disciplines and those chores even that allow us to be mindful of the work that we're doing each day, and that ultimately contribute to a happier life, more productive mindset, etc. So that was part of our exercise, likewise, that we helped clean up the temple grounds as a group. It was quite a fun way to step back and put that into practice. But as you see there with the key learnings, one of the main quotes that stuck out to all of us was that you might be able to outsource some of these activities, cleaning, household chores, otherwise, but you really can't outsource the ability to be mindful, use those opportunities to meditate, to step back, have some quiet moments to think and reflect for the future. And likewise, within the workplace, things such as 5S or 3S, 6S, whatever you might call it, that organization, daily housekeeping, how do we use that as an opportunity to ground our teams in that daily discipline, use that as a basis for driving more problem solving and improvement on top of that? So nice allegory to that. And then also his main question was, how do we become good ancestors? And he spoke about the ancestors that have preceded us, the ones that we're now becoming ancestors to, and how do we leave behind a better generation, and what we're hopefully finding, and that contributes to many elements within our lives and our businesses. But it was a great way to start the week and having that ground us in terms of some of that traditional wisdom, which led into yet another unique experience. We were able to go to a Japanese etiquette lesson in an elementary school. You can see me here very uncomfortable with some of the etiquette elements. It's not my best posture there, but it was quite fun to understand. These traditions have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and the way that Japanese treat entering a home, the way they respect positioning within the rooms, where the elders will sit, where the respected host will sit, the way that they treat sitting on the mat and not putting your feet in terms of on the silk border there. So very subtle elements that you wouldn't maybe appreciate until you understand the history and the context behind them, and you realize how ingrained that is within that Japanese culture, the way they show that respect. We then walked a brief way over to the school, and the elementary school was quite a cool experience to be able to see children kind of in their normal day to day. We joined them for lunch actually, and they were helping serve lunch, and we're actually helping prepare and then serve lunch. We went out to recess with them for a few minutes, and then came back in and had a nice question and answer with the principal of the school. And the way that they were learning not only Japanese culture, but also the way of collaboration, working together across all the other subjects likewise. But you could truly understand why Japanese are leaders in the business sense and the global sense, from the way that they're educated from a very young age. And that was one of the elements that stood out to us in the debrief, that they feel a tremendous responsibility of teaching that culture. It's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. There's a survivalist mentality in Japan that's pervasive, and it has to do with some of the world wars and some of the history since then. But really, it's how they come together and they're aligned as a culture within that heritage. And it also has to do with the feeling of, again, collaboration versus competition. That's a main mindset, more of a socialistic culture versus what you might find in America, perhaps individualistic. So it's nice to see some of that overlap as well, of how it links to a business sense. And we'll speak to that here momentarily likewise. Very good. So hopefully you're getting a flavor of some of the experiences, not just businesses, not just seeing machines operating. We were seeing some quite cool operating environments here. The next one was a post office, and you can look there in the middle and see that a lot of their mail is delivered on little postie bikes. Quite cool to see. And I'm going to see if this video will play. Part of their daily rhythm So you'll see it's a mentor and his mentee. This was the first day on the job for this younger gentleman here. They're doing a pre-flight check. So they're testing that their gears are working properly. They're able to keep it at a low speed before coming to an intersection here, showing him how to look both ways, obviously, maintaining safety, getting the nod before going through a nice cone obstacle course there, coming to a stop, putting the right foot out there, or left foot, I should say. Very good. So that is what they do every time they come out of the garage. And it might feel laborious and belaboring it, but you see the power of that. And it not only verifies to anybody watching that the person driving that bike is competent and is not inebriated or whatever else is limiting them, but it gives a very neat way of being able to see the person doing the job is able to do the job. And likewise, within a training context, it's a very quick way to understand, has what we've been teaching sunk in? Is this person trained and ready, able to go out into the field? Also, with the safety, we were asking about some of their routine checks. They do obviously daily, weekly, monthly maintenance on their bikes along with their vans, you can see in the background. So it's quite comprehensive. The other side with the safety, we did ask about the shoes, and we wondered, hey, they're driving postie bikes and they're on the highways and things. Do they not need safety boots when they're riding? And the response that we got was, well, the system is safe enough. We don't have accidents very common or frequently in Japan in this region, and therefore we don't feel it's necessary for the drivers to wear safety boots. And it was a good discussion that we had afterwards, and people realized that sometimes the safety equipment that we put into place is really to keep us safe from the chaos that is within our organizations and our operating environments, and not so much from the work itself. It's more from the disorder and the chaos that comes around us perhaps not having good housekeeping or good order and day-to-day discipline and rhythm. And it was just a good discussion, maybe something for you to reflect on in terms of safety. How do we identify and mitigate the real actual risks in our work environment versus doing it just for appearance or just to tick a box or compliance? And that was something that stood out to us, and hopefully, again, something that you can reflect on for your own operating environment likewise. We did also see very briefly here the power of what they're doing with on-the-job training. You saw a bit of that with the video and how they're linking that to some training within industry, they call it. So job instruction, job methods, job relations, and then job safety. It really has origins back in the World War II phase. The Americans started doing that with the Department of War. It came over to Japan. They're still using it yet today in terms of how to train and upskill their team members. Very good. Our next experience here was call it a landfill if you'd like, but we were calling it a combustible waste incineration plant. And it was entirely enclosed. It was not outdoors. It was quite a awesome facility to see as you drove up to it, probably 10 stories high. And what we got was a walkthrough that we thought was quite funny. They do this for fourth grade students each year, and it's part of a fourth grade's curriculum that all the students go through the local incineration plant. And we thought that seems a bit strange. Nice to have an understanding, but why would you spend that time? And especially why would we spend our time as business people to go through a facility like this? And what it really proved to us that as you walk through and as you see the power, and I'll show just a couple, a little bit of these, they had all these nice animations and graphics and made it quite actually cool to go through. It felt like going through a museum versus going through a landfill. And the power of that was in the education. So the incineration plant realized and the community realized that they needed to educate the members of that community about the system, and that the system is only good as its inputs. So you can't be putting the wrong type of rubbish into the waste that would go into the incineration plant, because that would break down the facility, obviously. And it teaches recycling from a young age. It teaches an appreciation of the waste that is generated by an individual and a household from a young age. And at the end of the day, it helps the Japanese understand their role within a community and maintaining a system that operates at a very high level and their role within that. So quite a powerful takeaway for us within our own companies, not just in a waste or landfill setting, but how do we help educate the people within our operating system about what it takes to maintain that system, and making sure that the inputs are good and validated, that they'll also contribute to that system being robust and healthy likewise. And it was also neat, part of the Japanese essence and lifeblood, given that they're a small island nation relatively, is that they have end-to-end solutions. So they're always thinking of a way to use byproducts. So they were using whatever burn off from the waste as the ash. They were able to sell that to an industrial manufacturer. They were generating electricity through some of the steam that was being generated through the incineration process. Filters were cleaning the air within not only the operating facility, but it was also going back into the city. They were measuring all that with a live feed camera. So you could see the level of mindfulness that they had to their emissions, everything around the environmental standpoint, not just from a convenience or a lip service view, but really from an actual functional standpoint likewise. Very good. All right, so we're shifting gears just a bit. We're getting into some of the leadership lessons. So now we're into the presentations that we were able to observe along with some case studies. The first one was at Tokyo Station. We went to see the Shinkansen cleaning, a 7-minute miracle, they call it. And this is a great case study. It's actually through Harvard Business School. You can find it online, at least an excerpt of it. And the gentleman you see here in the photo, Toru Yabe, is the subject of the case study. You can see his long history here, all the way with the railway, working his way up, became the general manager. When he stepped into his role with Tessay as, I believe you can see general manager there, he realized that morale was low, performance was low. He had many problems on his hands that he needed to solve. And what he kept telling himself was that the future is not something we imagine, but we create ourselves. That was his rallying cry, not only for himself, but for his team and his employees. And he saw the power of his role as a leader to show everyone the way forward, removing the obstacles. That was really what he stuck with throughout his presentation. And there were many subtle elements that I'll show you here on this slide. A few things that he did. He focused on a concept called omotenashi, which translates to hospitality. In his words, it was, how do we turn work into theater? We're doing something very mundane. People are just cleaning a train. It doesn't seem like it should be fun or enjoyable or even respected. And he said, let's make that much more fun for our team members and for the people that get to witness it on a regular basis. So they had all types of different uniforms and outfits that they were implementing, along with different ways that they bowed to the train. You see here in the photo, and in the way they go through actually cleaning the train in 7 minutes. They do that as the train pulls into the station. There's a couple-minute buffer for passengers to leave the train. They have 7 minutes to clean it, a couple minutes for people to get back on, and then the train goes right back out. So they made that into a fun experience that people actually enjoyed participating in and observing. They also realized that the employees didn't feel they had the respect of those that were watching. And this was before they implemented some of these changes. And they realized the uniforms are one small thing, but how do we change the perception of how our team members feel like they can have pride and respect with the work that they do? So they did a public media campaign, had some great advertising and some local commercials and things that were going through, and just making Tessay very cool in appearance and cool in their profession. And the quote down here is, you can see that a grandmother had her grandchild speak to her and say, there's such pride, you looked awesome and what you did when I saw you on TV. And wow, I can't believe you get to work for such a cool company like Tessay, and that's awesome. And that really took hold. And over the course of a few months or even a year, it became one of the more well-regarded companies, and people actually enjoyed going to the train station and being able to see Tessay cleaners, as we still do yet today. We got to go as a group and observe them doing that also at Tokyo Station. The power of this was that we see small changes can oftentimes be what unlocks a different mindset for the team members. And how do we flesh out some of that feedback from our team members around the uniform, something as simple as that. And then likewise with the equipment, they didn't like carrying around a mop and a bucket. So they came up with a way to have a collapsible mop that fit right into a carry bag, so they didn't have to be viewed as the cleaner walking through. So very subtle, unique ways that I guess we as leaders need to be thinking, what are our team members telling us, or what could we ask them for? That might be very simple and straightforward, but could tremendously impact not only morale, but also the way that their self-perception within the company is. Very good. So we'll shift on to Toyota. We went to the Toyota Techno Museum this time around. Toyota itself had they were doing some maintenance on their scaffolding, so we weren't able to go into the operating facility as closely as we would like to. Still got a nice view of it, and obviously the philosophy from the museum, but really the power of it with this is that you see the full story. And what is tremendous, and for me, I've been through this museum a few times before, but I think this time I was maybe in a different mindset, trying to learn, understand the history that level deeper. Sakichi Toyota, here at the top left, is known as the king of Japanese inventors, and he was really the origin of this Toyota story. He saw his mother struggling with a loom, and he realized, I need to do something to help her. And he was seeing that it was breaking down and causing her headaches of trying to fix it. And I'm not going to get the technical terms right, but he realized, I'm an inventor, I can fix it. And that was where it came up with the jidoka, the stop and fix, and the way that the loom would go across, and he would see when it would break, and that would stop the machine from running and not causing any more defects. So that was his very humble beginning. Over the course of his lifetime, he went from that single loom to creating this, and you can't quite see the text, but there were one female weaver could operate up to 30 to 50 looms at once. So the efficiency gain of single loom up to one weaver within a span of many different looms going, it was thousands of times of efficiency gains that one gentleman was able to innovate and develop and support. And nowadays, they're one of the more well-regarded loom companies in the world, that Toyota Loom. The neat element as well, his son Kichiro Toyota, you can see he was the businessman of this side, and he founded the motor company. So at first it was the sewing and the loom company. There wasn't a link into automotive until call it the 1920s and 30s, when Kichiro was going and learning from some of the Americans, actually Henry Ford, in terms of how they were doing the automotive industry well. And they brought that back to Japan and helped give that genesis as well. So you can see there in the photo with his nice car. And I think what stood out to me was that translation of family pride, family history, and heritage, how you take that into a company and a family of companies. It started with that single loom and now has evolved truly into a family of multi-billion dollar companies. And it's not the fact that they're multi-billion dollars that makes them unique or impressive. It's the fact that they're all focused with this similar mindset of how do we contribute to society, the economy, how do we create environments for our people to learn, grow, and develop. And they're highly respected companies. Anybody you speak to will recognize these names. Wherever they go, they build a great supplier network. So it really is something special that has been built. This quote at the bottom also stood out to us, is that they said, back to the billion-dollar company, that's not the important thing. The numbers are the shadow, they said. That's what we end up with at the end of the day. But let's focus on the work that we're doing each day, focus on how we're adding value to our customers, creating innovations for society, driving things forward. And if we do that well, then at the end of the day, the numbers will speak for themselves, as you can see. The other neat one here with the photo, you might wonder with the names of Toyota versus Toyota, some of you might know this, and you might have seen it, but they realized that there were a couple elements of why to change that name. One was the sound. Toyota has a bit more of a powerful ring to it than Toyota with a D. The other one they realized was that it was more efficient to use Toyota. With the kanji, it takes 10 strokes to do the traditional name. And with the other spelling of Toyota with a T, only 8 strokes. So you can go back to that humble beginning of how to save a couple of seconds of time, even with the way that they changed their company name. So more to say on that, but very powerful. A lot of research, as you can see, with the rise of all the books and all the study that has been done on that company. A quote that always stands out to me, and when I grew up in Kentucky and was able to work in that Toyota facility there, this was what you walked through every day. Massive banner on the wall. And in most plants in the world, you see this. Good thinking, good products. And really, when you distill that down, you realize that Toyota as a company, and companies that share that philosophy and that mindset, focus on developing their people's thinking and their problem solving capability in order for them to give rise to better innovation, better problem solving, better performance. So how do we influence our people's thinking and help ingrain that type of culture? That's the first and foremost tenet of leadership. They also look at how do we set a principle-based culture and mindset and philosophy across the way that we communicate our company values and our mission. There's a Toyota Way book, also a document, internal documents, both in 2001 and in 2020. They update those every so often when they feel like they're wavering off course of what their traditional values and culture are. And it's a great company document that you can research and find a bit around how they tell stories, how they're really sharing what it means to be part of this organization and what it means to have that type of good thinking that they're looking for and helping build. The other side are all the mechanisms to develop and foster a culture for people to do this type of good thinking and improvement. That comes down to the way that they're trained, brought through as a new hire. I was able to experience that firsthand in Kentucky, and really down to the way you're following a standard operating procedure, the way you're getting on the job training, the way you have mentorship on the line and coaching all along the way. You're part of a stand-up meeting, sometimes a couple times a day. You're contributing your ideas, your viewpoints, you're supporting problem solving, even as a team member. And the power of that, as you work your way through, you realize it's not just about you as the individual, it's about your contributions, what your mind and what you're able to bring to the team to drive that type of improvement. And it truly is powerful when you see it working. The other element with this good thinking is how do we use that to design systems, processes, and utilize tools that make workflow. We've all heard that with the lean ideals. And then really the goal of all these tools is how do we make problems visible? Where are we now? Where do we need to be or want to be? And what's the gap in between? And we have that, we can obviously begin that problem solving journey as a result. The final tenet here on the Toyota side is the power of servant leadership. And many of you have seen this image. There are many good books about it. But I think embodying this, not only as an individual leader, but helping your team members understand that we do work for them. If we are a leader or organization because we've worked our way up, it's not because of our own wit or skill or ability. It's because we have demonstrated an ability to help others solve problems. And that truly is our job. We're influencing them with a mindset, with a positivity, with a viewpoint that we are solving problems. That's part of our day-to-day responsibility and obligation. Let's continue to stay optimistic and gain new knowledge to do what it takes in order to solve it. And if we're doing that well, company does well, but we as leaders are also able to excel. You also see here at the top, suppliers and customers are also at the top of that triangle view. And I know there's more to say on this likewise, and if you've done study on some of the way to handle supplier development and the way you're looking at customer value, it's part and parcel with this. But it really is a mindset that permeates beyond we as a company being self-preserving, us just focusing on our own good and how to be profitable or sustainable for our own right, versus looking more outwardly and saying, how can we best serve the people that we're working on behalf of, not only the customers, innovating for them, continue to produce a good product or service, but the suppliers, people we're working with that are supporting us to do this good job, how do we help build their capability also? And it can give rise to a much longer term viewpoint and mindset versus just making numbers for a couple of good years, perhaps. And the final piece, just another way of saying this: good thinking, good products. The people piece can never have enough said about it. And really, for me, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. People are truly the most important side, and obviously the most complicated at times beyond even some of the traditional machinery and equipment. But it is really what makes or breaks an organization over the long run. And it's about the culture, the way that we're handling a series of responses to how do we identify and solve problems. How do we look at what the customer and suppliers are needing our support and our help with as an organization? And how do we treat our people truly as an asset and a resource versus sometimes as a liability or a headache, as often does happen, not only in our South African environment, but all around the globe. So it really is an attitude shift at first, and then it's about building a good system to enable people to truly become our most important asset. Very good. So we're on to our next leadership set of lessons here from a gentleman named Masamoto Amazawa. He goes by Matt because he came over to Kentucky, where I grew up in 2000. So he predated my involvement at that facility, but it was quite funny. He joined us for a couple of days. He's now 82 years old, still as sharp as ever, even though he's fighting some cancer. Just he's a very rare and unique gentleman. My father was able to spend time with him back in Kentucky, and always spoke highly of the way that he would relate with the team members. He would be on the floor every day, as most of the Japanese leaders that came over to Kentucky would. They would really indoctrinate themselves in the local culture, be part of the community there. And that was powerful for not only seeing it, but also seeing what it truly meant to them to live that out. So he joined us again for a couple of days on the bus. For one of the days, he gave us an awesome presentation, and I chuckled several times at his slides, as you can imagine here as you look through it. The one at the top, he first started, he told us his first job at Toyota was to find a beautiful wife. And he had a map of who he perceived to be his wife candidates, and he would make it his point that when he did his gimbal walks every day to spend a little bit extra time there. He ended up marrying a wife from Toyota, and unfortunately she passed away a couple years ago, but he still spoke very highly of his experiences and also shared many stories of marriages that happened throughout the Toyota community, but you can imagine. And the other side too was how he rose through Toyota. So he worked there for many years. You can see 1964, he started at the Motomachi plant, which is in Japan, and then many years worked his way up, came over to Kentucky in 1997, and eventually became president and chairman there in the early 2000s. And part of that journey, as I mentioned before, was him getting the culture right. There were a series of events that led to Toyota Kentucky losing its way a bit. The way he put it is that the Americans thought they were the best in the world, so he needed to come get their head straight, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think that makes perfect sense. But you can imagine some of the discussions and the battles they had around the cultural piece and what was necessary to get the managers and supervisors back on board with helping their team members identify and solve problems. Some of that simple, straightforward element that can sometimes go missing. So for him, he gave us a couple takeaway comments I'll show you here momentarily. He loved spending time on Taiichi Ohno's lessons that ultimately Taiichi Ohno gave to him. And also he spent time on the quality piece. And so you can see there were a couple quotes around quality and lean and continuous improvement of not just doing it for the sake of it, but actually doing it in the way that makes sense for your system in a very straightforward manner. So we'll speak to that detail here. One of our questions that we asked him was, how do people rise to the top? And especially in his own individual context, but likewise other leaders in Toyota. A few of these make perfect sense, getting people to work together, but the other ones a bit more difficult in terms of how to translate that to our world. So seeing problems, what does that mean? Solving problems, and then even most importantly, we don't show off. And I really like that as a takeaway. And we're not always perfect at that, obviously, especially us Americans are guilty many times doing that. But really, the goal is, how do you have that alignment back to that collaboration piece we spoke of from the elementary school? And it's when you're in an organization, not only are we all on the same page about how to see problems, so when we're on a line, what mechanisms do we have, or in the service industry, how do we have something within our team that alerts us and tells us when we have a problem actually there to solve? How do we respond to that? So are we criticizing? Are we trying to sweep it under the rug? Are we jumping in immediately to a solution or how to solve the problem? The first thing is, how do we have a forum to properly communicate around the problems that we are identifying? And that might be a visual board or some way of displaying it. And then how do we engage our teams productively and collaboratively in solving those problems? And that's following a structured process. Toyota uses the 8-step, which is their TBP, their business practices. There are many other frameworks you can use, but the goal is, let's all be on the same page about solving problems. Let's follow a consistent frameworks that we're all speaking that same language. And as we're doing that, let's not show off needlessly. Let's let the work do the talking, and then let's share that learning even better with other teams across the company. And likewise, as we're going through this, new hires coming in, new people coming into that area, we're helping show them the way versus just showing that we know how to do it all. So a couple other anecdotes from that, but it was quite powerful to see that this is day-to-day ingrained. You can be a team member at Toyota and spend many good years there doing these 4 steps and obviously work your way up in the organization. I've been able to see that firsthand, and you see the power of what that means to actually have a collaborative sense of leadership versus more individualistic, all about me doing it. The slide that I think I loved the most and stuck in my brain was this one. Don't forget, money wrecks your brain. And he had a little animation going with the hammer, so added to the effect of it. But the power of that was, don't just jump to a solution that you say, oh, we'll go buy a new piece of equipment, or we'll go buy a new piece of software. Oh, we need more team members. Let's go hire a bunch of team members. It's saying, let's actually step back and follow that problem solving process with discipline and going through each step, understanding why, asking the right questions, and being diligent before we run off and spend that money. And the goal here is that also with our problem solving efforts and the way we're identifying these problems is that it's worth identifying 1 step, 1 second, or 1 cent that can be saved. And I had heard this before in a different context, but hearing it yet again from the president of Toyota Kentucky, and he went back and worked for Lexus, you recognize the power of that. And at times it feels like, why would I waste my time? Because I'm already wasting another second thinking about how to save a second. But the goal is that that accrues tremendously over the long term. And you're always thinking, getting your team members to think. That's how you have that multiplier effect of how to be making these savings. And that's the goal of a good problem solving forum, daily huddle, weekly team meeting, reviewing the week before, and being able to understand, where do we have hiccups, obstacles, bottlenecks that are costing us steps, seconds, and cents, and where can we put in some very straightforward solutions, things that we can do in the course of maybe a couple hours or a day at most, versus going off and spending whatever amount of money to solve that problem. Not saying it's never warranted to go and make investments or do capital expenditure, but the goal is that's not the first line of call with the way that you're treating this type of improvement. On these, so he had 10 slides for these 10 precepts, and we won't go into that much detail, but you can recognize the power of these. So these were directly from Taitiano. There's some great articles and books around these 10 precepts, but we were able to hear the firsthand anecdotes around each of these 10. The first one, we'll pause on this. Taitiano used to say, you are a cost. And you as a manager, especially, you're a very high cost because you're not out on the line making the cars, and your responsibility as a manager is to reduce waste because that's how you actually create value in this context beyond actually just working on the line. And the challenge that was given, not only by Taichiana, but even nowadays, if you are a salaried manager, your expectation is to create 3 times your salary in annual savings. And that seems like a lot, but you start boiling that down, you recognize what does that actually mean within my day to go off and drive that level of savings, whether from a procurement standpoint or whether from an optimization of efficiency standpoint. And you start to recognize that's a job in and of itself. And it's not about me being the manager that gets to sit in the office. It's I have work I need to go do in order to help identify ways to solve those types of problems. The second one was having a possibility mindset, being optimistic and being willing to say, I can do it and try before you give up, obviously, or try before you don't do anything. So that was the other thing around if you're willing to do it, take that first step, and then that'll put you even more into a position of being able to complete it. Third, workplace as a teacher, the power of going to the Gemba, the place the work is done, and finding answers there, relying on the data, relying on firsthand observation versus hearsay. And really, that's a day to day getting out of the office, spending time at the place the work is being done with the people doing the work. The other ones here start to fit into that number 2. So, doing things immediately, starting something right now, taking small incremental steps with discipline, following that, persevering, not giving up until you finish things. And likewise, number 6, explaining those difficult things in an easy to understand manner, the power of teaching as you're going through, learning on one hand, teaching on the other is the power of how you can help support your team members. Likewise, repeating those things, communicating clearly around a vision. The other piece, number 7, waste is hidden. Do not hide it, make problems visible. We saw that. That's the power of all the tools. 5S, mistake proofing, quality controls you're building in, the visual controls likewise, the visual boards you have with all the metrics and KPIs, the reports that go up to the management team for their review. The power of all those tools is that they help bring problems to the surface, that then we can put those into a very structured problem solving process and use that in order to drive our improvements there. Number 8, valueless motions are equal to shortening one's life. And this I've heard in different ways as well, but the translation here is that if we're putting people into a bad system where they're needing to waste their time, energy, or intellect, we are wasting their life. And I don't think anybody on this call, especially if you're investing this time, our interest is not in wasting people's life. And especially if it's our environment, our company that we're creating this system within, even more responsibility that we feel that we need to be creating the right type of system where people can work well together, they can identify problems, we can help solve those problems if they're not able to do it on their own. And you recognize the power of that as a leadership philosophy if that's the way you're coming into work every day to improve the system in order to not waste your people's lives. Number 9, re-improve what was improved for further improvement. That speaks for itself. Improvement is always going to be part of your life as a leader and as a manager and even as an individual. So get used to it. And I think that's part of the philosophy of being optimistic with improvement, even when it can be frustrating at times to do what it takes. And then the last one here, wisdom is given equally to everybody. And the other word in terms of wisdom was experiences. So we all have the same time. We all get a similar, or I should say, same number of experiences, might be different contexts. But the point is whether we can exercise the wisdom that we gain from those experiences in that time. And I think the one side is how do we spend our time in a way that gives rise to even more wisdom and knowledge from it. But likewise, too, how do we invest ourselves in being able to learn from the moment, from the day that we're living within, being able to look at the system as a whole and drive that type of improvement. So more that can be said on each of these, obviously, but hopefully some room for thought on each of your behalves as leaders and managers. One other mindset here from Mr. Ono. In terms of procurement, you are not buying your supplier's products or services, you're buying their processes. And I thought that was quite powerful. And you recognize before you go into a long-term relationship with a supplier, because in that context of Toyota, they view supplier relationships truly as maybe lifetime at times, and they view it much more beyond transactional. It really is how to fit it into the broader system and supporting one another within that. And you look and say, if we're buying into a relationship that's long term and our processes aren't up to shape, and we're going to be dealing with those from day one, and it's going to be causing all of us headaches. So the goal is, before we enter in these relationships, let's be mindful of what processes we're facing, even if that means spending a bit more time up front to understand their processes. Now, but I love that beyond just looking on the face of what you're seeing, of what you're buying, let's think of the time that we're going to need to spend to foster that relationship over the longer term. And likewise, if we are a supplier, how do we view our processes as what people are purchasing beyond just what we're just selling to them? And the final quote from Mr. Amazawa here, as I mentioned, after he went to Kentucky and helped get that back on the rails, he went back to Japan and was the VP at a Lexus facility. For those that aren't familiar, Lexus is the premium line of Toyota. It is very well regarded in Japan and elsewhere around the world. And the quote that stood out to us is he used to say, and the team members used to say at the Lexus facility, if you're producing a Lexus, if you're working on this line, you yourself must be a Lexus. And some of it sounds a little fierce or aggressive or harsh, maybe, but you think about what that means, and it's that relentless pursuit of improvement, that day-to-day discipline, getting better from a thinking standpoint, from a physical standpoint, mental, emotional, all the rest of it as a leader, as a team member. And that is really powerful. When you look at my role is to create a high-quality automobile on a team of high-quality individuals. So I myself must also become high quality in the way that I'm living, behaving, acting, all the rest. So that's open to your interpretation of what it means, but quite a powerful thing for a leader to be conveying to his team and for his team to be embracing and embodying. The other piece of this is that the Lexus assembly line is not something that is given out very sparingly, I should say. It hadn't come over to the US until just a few years ago. And Kentucky actually had the opportunity to have a Lexus assembly line, and they recognized that there's a tremendous level of quality expectation on that line. They don't take it lightly at all. No defects are accepted. And what was neat about this is that once they got it going, people would walk through and they said, this line is clean and silent. And you would expect on a very busy automobile line where many decisions are being made in real time, parts are moving, et cetera, that you'd have a lot of noise. And they said it was almost dead silent. So you couldn't hear people talking. There were a little bit of the bells and whistles going from the and-on cords and things, but almost silent from what you saw. So powerful to think that that's the evolution of a very good system that you can work within, where you get to the point where it's just a flow and a rhythm that is easy to behold. Shifting gears to our next case study. This is a company called Avex. They are an automotive supplier that took on some of the Toyota production system principles, otherwise known as Lean. You might know them as, but they are located nearby some of the automotive facilities there in Nagoya, Japan. A couple of their slides here that they share with us, I'm putting these on the page just to give rise to their level of management thinking that they had. And they said 100% quality for them is more important than making money. And that might sound like a lot, and it is, but that was their commitment, is that quality we cannot accept if we pass on a defect to our customer. That is a failure on our behalf, failure as a company, and that's not the way we're going to be sustainable and successful. So they built in all types of inspections, non-value added activity to make that investment, but you can see that it is now paid off. The other thing, and I'll show you this one first, this is powerful. This is the hockey stick graph that you can see of their sales. But beyond the sales, they said, as our people grow, so does the company. And that was their prevailing view on how they ran their management and their company. In the course of this 33 years, they've gone from 12 to 550 employees, and they've had almost a 900% sales growth, up to a very robust number of sales revenue. But I think what was neat is that throughout the presentation on the slide itself, they're celebrating the number of employees growth and the way that their people were being developed beyond the sales. The numbers are the shadow. They said it yet again to us, and we were able to see it there in real time. Applying the principles and the tools, absolutely, but really focusing on our team members' development, the way they can grow, develop, the way that we're promoting teamwork, multi-skilling our team members. That's the way we're able to get to that point of sustainability and longevity as a company. They also had a very interesting scheme with their pay. They were getting to the point where if the company was doing well, as you can see it has been recently, they would pay 15 months salary in a year period, 12-month period. And if the company did very well, they would pay another 2 months, so up to 17 months of salary to their team members, people working on the production assembly line. And that obviously, as you can see, tremendous investment in that human resource. But at the end of the day, people were giving their ideas, they were driving improvements, the innovations were just tremendous, and they were rewarding their team members for being part of that growth and part of the company's success likewise. So it was hand in hand, win-win that we saw in real time. Very good. So we're shifting now into the work system benchmarking. Think of this as a operating environment, manufacturing environment. 5 companies stood out in terms of these environments. Avex, I mentioned. The other ones, Mifune, supplier, Toto Sanitecno, actually one of the largest toilet companies in the world. You might have one yourself. Very, very advanced technology. Takai Build was a construction facility and actually a site we got to go visit. Quite neat to see that. And then Kuno Metal, another supplier. So very unique environments, all with their own set of tool application, but with a very similar leadership philosophy. Some using the Toyota production system or Lean as their background, others using other frameworks, but the similarities definitely shown through. This is maybe from my own mind on it, and it is not fully formed yet. It was as we were going through that week and trying to step back and say, again, some of the companies using TPS or Lean, others using more of a Six Sigma approach or a waterfall approach in the way they were looking at their project management, the way they were commercializing new products. So you really think, what are the similarities of these work systems, and how can you think of a way to distill it down for any given operating environment to really begin? And the way I like to look at it is first design or define the work itself. So you're looking at the system as a whole, whatever you're producing, product or service. How do we have a process map that tells that story, gives a bird's eye view of all the inputs and outputs? Might be good to use a SciPoc diagram. So that's one of those Six Sigma type tools. You can look at the suppliers, the inputs, the processes, outputs, and customers at the end of the day to give you a better context and understanding of what the process or system needs to be able to do. Being able to define a theoretical max. So what are we capable of? What are we looking at with this system each day, each week, each month, for a year? What do we feel like we can get out the door? Again, whether it's a product, a service, fulfillment operation, whatever it might be, having that number in our mind, it doesn't even need to be scientifically perfect. It just needs to be a view of what is our theoretical max. And then within that, what do we want to say is our standard planned output? So it could be 85% might be a world-class benchmark you use. It might be even higher if you have a different type operating environment, it might be lower. But the point is, let's know what we're ultimately capable of, what we can be working towards, but what do we want to plan for that's consistent on a regular basis, shift by shift. The point with this next one is within the work center itself, the place the work is being done, what visual aids, tools are best practice for application, whether it's a Kanban board or a Scrum board in a team setting, whether it's 5S and visual controls in a workplace setting, whatever it might be, mistake proofing otherwise. Let's step back and be able to think, what tools could we apply in a very straightforward manner that are applicable to make the work more straightforward for our team members doing it. And even better, let's help them simplify that work. So these two probably need a bit more meat on the bone in terms to make it come to life a bit, but hopefully some of the examples will elucidate it. The next piece here is probably the most critical one in my mind. How do we manage the system? Once we've done this first design and definition, how do we have a way to track plan versus actual? That is the single most powerful metric that you can have for a given hour or a shift or a day. Again, whatever time frame, what is our plan that we want to achieve? And that first enables us to think, what should we be achieving? What are we able to achieve? And then the actual gives us a delta. So that's our first problem that has all other problems within it that we can be working to solve. So plan versus actual in your environments. Again, I'll say there's no more powerful metric to begin with. Something on this trip that really stood out to me was the power of what they call Hinka 10 and a Japanese translation to change point. And I'll show you on the next slide. They use the fishbone diagram, man, material, method, machine, as their 4 M's. And they would look at this each day, each shift, and be able to say what for today is a change point for each of those areas that our team need to be aware of. And that was the way they were understanding variability that would allow them or disallow them from getting to what they were planning to achieve or what they were able to achieve ultimately. And very powerful way for the team to understand what is a change point, what is a standard operating state, and what can we be doing to create more buffer and resistance to it. Next up is identifying problems. So once we've defined the management system, the way we're tracking plan, actual, what's going to happen that's going to change the system performance, let's then find a way to identify problems. And that's a forum of communication, around a daily meeting, a team huddle, a weekly review of performance, whatever it might be. But the power is more frequently, the better, and more team member involvement, the better, because we can identify a wider set of problems by doing that. So identify problems comes from having a good system that we're working within that gives rise to those problems. Then the next piece and the more difficult side of it is how do we solve those problems that are coming up? And the real goal of this, any of the tools is making a problem visible, but then the next side is what are we going to do about it? And some of this we need to put off to a longer term problem solving initiative or a project, perhaps. That could be quality circle activity, you might call it. It might be more of a team getting behind it. More investment might be needed in the ultimate state. But the short term power is how do we have a very clearly defined action item list that lives right there, the place the work is getting done. You might have a digital solution likewise to generate a work order or whatever it might be. Whatever is most efficient, whatever gets a team thinking in an aligned way of what's the work that we need to get done today to support the work that we as a team are doing. That's what is ultimately powerful about this. So the virtuous cycle there of designing, defining the work all the way through to more work to do to continue to improve that work that we're doing and simplifying it. That's that PDCA plan, do, check, and act. So now let's go into each of those in detail. Design or define the work. This is a bit of the analytical phase if you're going into planning it. If not, it's a helpful way to maybe look at the work that you're doing in a bit more detail. Work balancing, some call it a Yamazumi chart, the Japanese translation, again, just to look at the way the work is being sequenced and structured and making sure that it's flowing equally across the line. Advanced process analysis might be a flow chart, might be a SciPod diagram, might be a value stream map, whatever you want to call that. Taking that first investment of time, getting the right team members in the room to look at that work that you're doing, making sure that it's set up appropriately is powerful. And it's not just engineers, not just executives, it is also team members, people that are doing the work, that are suppliers of the work, customers of the work, helping to inform the way that we expect the work to be done. The next step is the safety and basic skills verification, looking for ways to make the work more valuable and fun. So we're getting the voice of the customer. We're building in some of the safety piece that makes it enjoyable to do, not just whatever grunt work to do or things that our team members easily go by the wayside of. So the goal is let's make the things that need to be done from a safety, quality, compliance standpoint easy to understand, easy to do, and let's make the work itself even more valuable by listening to the people that are customers of the work. The other side is the quality piece. A couple mechanisms on this. The goal is to build in quality. That's easier said than done, depending on the context. But the power is how do we visualize that? How do we help our team members understand that we're not passing on defects? If me as a team member, I as a team member, am seeing a defect in real time as I'm producing it or I'm servicing it, I need to be confident enough, brave enough, and empowered enough to say there is a problem here. Let's stop it before it goes out the door. And at worst, the customer finds it. And what was so funny, I guess, might be the right word, but what we heard a couple of times from different environments was if you're passing on a defect, you're expecting me to wipe behind you or pick up some of your trash. And so they use different words, of course, but you get the picture. Is that they were very critical in terms of their wording of if you're passing on a defect, you're making someone else's life very difficult to go back and need to find it and then need to fix it. And especially if the customer finds it and needs to fix it, then we all are having a headache that we need to pick up. So take that as you will, but that was the goal. How do we build in quality, not only as a mindset, but also with some mistake proofing and other mechanisms that we'll speak to. I mentioned here around the Hinka 10 board, so the cause and effect fishbone diagram you might see here. There's many ways you can use this tool. I truly see this as the second most powerful tool beyond plan versus actual. This is when there is a gap. For me personally, I'll go look at the fishbone in terms of why do we have that gap, what gave rise to it, and you can see the cause and effect element there. And then on the boards, you can see they had the workstation definition, who's working where. They had a couple other elements, which I'll show you on the next slide. But then each day, again, daily stand up in the morning, and likewise at the shift handover, they were saying each of these elements, man, machine, material, method, and this is workforce, man or woman, obviously. They were looking at saying which of these are changing for the shift. What do we need to be aware of? Anything that might influence the way that we're going to operate this area for the day. So a very powerful tool. We saw this in many of the environments. I had seen it before, but maybe not in the way it came across as powerfully on this experience in Japan. Okay, a couple boards here. These were from Mifune, so this is plan versus actual. There are more ways to count of how to track plan versus actual: whiteboards, digital, paper-based, whatever you want, electronic again. So the goal is let's just have that. Whatever way is most straightforward and simple for you to track plan versus actual is the best way to get started, and they can evolve from there. You can see the system with digital to a whiteboard that gave the results here. And then likewise, this was their, I believe, weekly review board. So they would have their daily results going up. This was their work bouncing, the Yamazumi, had their team members. They had the skill matrix there. They had the 5S, a couple other improvements, problem solving activity. You can see the size of that. That was in one small work area. And that's just all the evidence of the good thinking that they all ultimately use to create good products. And it doesn't need to look like this in your world. This is just one, again, of many examples. But the power is how do we look at the work, visualize the work, identify problems, and then have that thinking to solve the problems. Get another few examples here. This is a visual board example. You've probably seen it before if you've heard one of my presentations, but this is the Toyota visual board example. Footprints there, you can see the size of it. The power with this is that they say it takes months at time to get these pillars right in terms of what to put on it. The metrics, the KPIs, the leading and lagging indicators, the Hoshin plan, or what are you working on for the next quarter or year perhaps. And the goal is let's have a clear visibility that cascades all the way from the team member shop floor level all the way up to the managerial level, and that we have a smooth flow of the KPIs that are relevant. They've broken down appropriately that we can see where impact happens at each step in that chain. So that could be its own workshop, visual management and Hoshin, and definitely we'll give more information on that if you'd like. The other side here is just the way that they visualize problems, identify those in their systems. This was the president's desk in one of the companies we visited. So you can see right there in full view. And I love the open plan offices and being able to see real-time production numbers, having the meetings there where people can hear it, be part of that discussion. A couple other examples of plan versus actual. The shadow boards, yet another way of identifying problems. If a tool is removed, so some people they turn up their nose to 5S and say it's too simple, it's too easy of a thing. But the power of that is, again, it helps identify a problem, understand why things are happening. And then likewise, people are now embracing the new technologies that exist. You can see it's pervasive, all the AI and the possibilities that exist with that. So how do we use some of the new technology to even more augment our ability to identify problems and then use it to help the problem solving process likewise. These are all examples of what we saw of their problem solving evidence. And this was before and after. So that's maybe the third most powerful tool. That's the power of being able to see, as a result of us identifying a problem and our team members from all levels of the organization seeing a problem for what it is. Now we've gone through a few steps. We follow that structured 8-step or PDCA process, however you want to define that. And then we've ultimately gotten to a state where it's better. We are saving time, we're saving money, we're improving quality, we're improving the use of our team members' intellect, and we want to celebrate that. And you can see these are all wallpapered across most of the organization that you find of the improvements, and the quick brief story that you'd find is an example of what we want to celebrate in terms of the thinking. This thinking continuously with improvement or a Kaizen mindset. And we go back to it's a constant effort. It's part of the lifeblood. It's part of the expectation of being a leader in this organization, this type of organization, or a team member. And that really is what we, again, want to celebrate on a day-to-day basis. Beyond just getting the work done, it's how do we improve the work that we're doing and how do we make that enjoyable for our team members to be part of. All right, so we're wrapping up on Japan, and it looks like just in time here. Couple other lessons from the culture, and I'm sure many of you have been to Japan. If you have not, it is quite a unique world. I like to say it's my favorite developed country in the world. South Africa is my favorite developing or emerging country, put it that way. But Japan is quite unique, and it is quiet. Most places that you go, especially in public areas, so trains, even on the street, anywhere that you're in other people's company, it is almost silent. And they love this concept of wa, they call it. It's their sense of harmony, and it's not wanting to create a nuisance or a disturbance for those around you. And we Americans are not so good at honoring that at times, as you can imagine, but it's a good learned behavior with our sense of wa. And that also is the reason why they abide by their traffic lights so well. So if you know me, you know I like to take some jogs here and there. And so in the mornings or in the evenings after we were doing the benchmarking tours, I would like going for a run in the city street. And you realize that if you get to a crosswalk and the light's red, you actually have to stop. And it's one of those things where you kick yourself, you say, I'll lose my momentum every time. But somebody had told me on a previous trip that it's not about you and getting to your destination more quickly. It's about the example that you're setting, going back all the way to the school. And there was one moment in particular where I was tempted to go across the street, and a young girl and her mother were standing right next to me. And you just think, hey, that's the example that I'm setting. If I run out into the road, then her mother has to go teach her a lesson about who's that crazy man going off running and why should you not do that and why should you follow the sign. So that's the power of a good rule, a good policy. I won't say I do it all the time, but just being mindful of the reason for that in general and the way that influences their culture. And it also was maybe what I saw as their motivation for when they cleaned up the World Cup stadium a couple of years ago, and why that made international headlines that they were doing that. And it was just them honoring the harmony and then honoring that they had been part of the experience. They wanted to support the experience. It also had to do with their term called Motenai. We heard this in several contexts. The one was at the incineration plant with the garbage. The other one was at a few different restaurants. And I had not heard it previously, so it stood out to me. But it was the idea that if you are wasting food, if you're wasting a resource, then you're obviously, it's not ideal, and it's not part of the culture to be wasteful. And even down to a grain of rice, they're saying its purpose is to be a grain of rice that can contribute to somebody being fed. And if you're wasting it, then you're disregarding its purpose on earth. Well, that's a deeper way to think about a grain of rice, but it's that day-to-day mindset of looking at ways to reduce our own waste, being mindful of what we are consuming. Let's consume what we need and not take beyond it. And just very powerful. No, none of us is perfect, obviously, but a nice ideal to be striving towards likewise. A couple other Japan moments. And again, just to maybe a promotion for if you haven't been to Japan before, it's an awesome place to go. I was able to spend a day on the pilgrimage trail down near Osaka. Beautiful experience, 1,000-year-old where the Buddhist monks used to walk through on their pilgrimage. And then Tokyo, not Toyota. Tokyo is quite a powerful city, over 30 million people, but as again, very harmonious, quiet in most places you go on the trains and otherwise. A couple different unique districts there. Nagoya also is more of a hub of industry, and that's close to Toyota City, and traditionally where more of the manufacturing take place in the middle of the country, and very neat to see how well that operates, likewise, in addition to some of its culture. It's a very cool experience. It is a special place in my heart, so I look forward to going back many times over the course of my journey. Let's transition here, and wanted to save enough time, might be rushed a little bit, but we'll do our best here, of transition to Jordan. So quite a fun opportunity to be able to do them back to back. It literally was 1 week into the next. The work week in Jordan starts on Sunday, so I got in early Sunday morning and was there with the team that morning, and was able to join for a lean greenbelt training hosted by an organization called MEDAIR. MEDAIR is a Swiss NGO, and I respect it highly. It's a friend of mine that has introduced me to that link, Andrew Paris, as you see here in the photo. He's worked in a couple of different African countries along with back in the US, and we had a great room of participants, mostly Jordanian, a couple others from around, and I think we might even have one or two on the call today. I saw them on the invite list, and thank you if you guys are on. It was awesome to be with you. And the power of when you see the teams in the room thinking through, as we said, identifying and solving problems, following some of these best practice frameworks, learning it for the first time, being willing to make mistakes, asking for help, it's always invigorating. And from a facilitation standpoint, no better opportunity than when people are receptive, they're open to learn, open for feedback, and it just makes for a great environment over the course of that week. Jordan, people asked me and asked my wife, who knew I was going, and others around. They said, "Why are you going to Jordan right now? It's not a good time." And we said, "Well, it's a very good time to go identify and solve problems." And I was very curious. And Jordan, for those that are not familiar, and I didn't know either, is a very safe country, and they are quite a presence in that region that can be oftentimes complicated. They have also become quite a hub for refugees, and they do that in a willing sense, and they have an advanced enough economy to be able to support it. And they have a tremendous infrastructure, especially the people that were part of our training that are offering that type of humanitarian aid and support to make it possible. That number has ballooned. So as you see here, the statistic on the left from MEDAIR showed 755,000 refugees in 2022. It has now almost doubled to 1.3 million. And so that is not a good statistic to have an increase in. And for a variety of reasons, as I'm sure all of you are aware, But it's frustrating at times when you look at it from afar, and also challenging but fulfilling likewise when you can have a well-functioning system that can offer support to the people that are in need likewise. So a couple moments about the training itself. It was over the course of the full week, full days. Andrew has developed a fantastic outline for the Greenbelt training and walks through all of, again, the philosophy, leadership, intro to lean. I was able to give a little bit of context from the Japan trip as well, and then able to get into some of the tools. So we did the process maps, we did the SIPOC diagrams, looked at some of the problem solving tools, visual boards, daily stand-ups. So really hit the wide swath of application. And the teams had a great amount of exercise and case study and practical application and sharing that back out to a wider group. So again, was a very unique and powerful week. Throughout the week as well, I enjoyed meeting people tremendously. And one of the discussions that I had was up on the rooftop. So we were in central Amman, the capital of Jordan, and overlooking some of the buildings there, and was able to speak to a couple of the participants. And they had been working in the large refugee camps, Atari and Azraq. And these are massive, by the way. You can see the photos and see the scale, size of them. And my curiosity, of course, wanting to be respectful of what's going on, but also wanting to understand how are you handling the current conflicts, and how do you do that with people from different viewpoints, different religious backgrounds? How do you show respect? And what they helped me to boil it down to and to understand was we all are fundamentally the same. We are all humans, and we all deserve a certain level of respect and care, especially if we're lower on that hierarchy of needs, if we've been displaced, or if there are elements in our life that we need basic support with. And that's powerful. And you can really look beyond what motivations, politically, religiously, ethnically, whatever, otherwise. And the power of that is how do we all, again, show each other respect. And if somebody's in need, be able to give them that need in a way that is respectful as well, lets them get back up on their feet. And also, too, we asked the question of how are people still lacking these basic needs? And it is a question that we can ask in the day and age that we live in. I was having a discussion this morning with a couple of guys I think that are on this call around we have all this advanced technology and all the economical prosperity in different parts of the world. And how do we still have problems like this where people are suffering tremendously? And I think you could boil it down to a couple of things, but I like to look at it as broken systems of order, of political sense, of governmental sense, of different motivations and different directions, and it's just broken systems that I think give rise as the root cause to a lot of the ways that our joy is stolen as individuals. So very humbling experience, as you can imagine, being in Jordan, being able to see some of it firsthand on a limited basis, but also being able to support the team members that are out there each day doing some great work, supporting the people in need. So truly impactful to see how these tools that you pick up in a place like Japan or the US or South Africa or whatever are being applied in an environment that is not as straightforward perhaps as we might be used to, and admirable the way that they're doing that. Neat. So a couple other observations and key learnings from both Andrew and myself as we worked through. We were highly impressed by the professionalism and engagement and capability of the team. There was never a time in the week where we didn't feel like we had full engagement and full buy-in from everybody there. It was awesome. The level of thinking, the level of discussion and discourse around the issues was objective. It was mindful, but also it was very purposeful, intentful as well. It was fun to see everybody worked together from different environments, different organizations, even in the room. And that sense of collaboration was very palpable. The lean principles was neat just to have that sense of, okay, you see them in Japan, that's great. Everybody buys into it. Might be some of that Japanese culture that everybody understands likewise. But the power of seeing the principles apply across different borders and contexts, very unique. And really seeing that they're not viewed as inappropriate, maybe in terms of inappropriate terms of the context. People look at it and say, that's the right leadership philosophy. That's the right way of engaging my team members. That's the right way that I can look at identifying and solving problems, and being able to appreciate lean, the power of what it is about, what it's able to do. Putting that into practice was neat to see how that can work. From an organizational standpoint, I know Andrew, who works within MEDAIR, oftentimes can voice some subtle frustration maybe for himself that he doesn't feel like he's able to be as effective spreading this lean mission as he'd like to be. And I think we kept coming back throughout the week that let's celebrate the process and not just the result. It goes back to that slide a little bit ago with AVEX and that hockey stick trajectory. It wasn't about getting to a certain number from a sales standpoint, from a number of people training standpoint. It wasn't just chasing a number. It was actually focused on let's follow that process on a daily basis, weekly basis. Let's offer the right type of opportunities from a training and development standpoint for our team members to have a new way of thinking, a new way of engaging in problem solving behavior, and let's celebrate that versus whatever other metric you want to put on the page. Also, just the necessity of leadership structure and discipline. So you do need some of that to support the habits as they're being built. From a week like this with a green belt training, I know there's a lot of good energy even for myself. How do you sustain that in a way that is objective? Maybe there's a clear checklist, routinized way that can help keep you accountable to maintaining that progress and that good way of thinking. And also the power of let's respect all of our unique differences and let's not look at that as a hindrance when we're going into an interaction or problem solving opportunity, and rather let's look at that as a way of getting a new and distinct viewpoint and offering a new a view of how to perhaps look at a problem. So saw that firsthand in terms of the different organizations, different backgrounds in the room, but always relevant in our day-to-day likewise. All right, and to wrap up, Jordan, a very unique, beautiful country as well. I do highly recommend it. Some people said we met some other tourists from different countries, and said people told us we were absolutely crazy. They thought we were going on a suicide mission coming to Jordan. I said, I'm glad that you came. I'm able to change your thinking. Same for me. And so please do not think of that region or think of Jordan as that type of suicide mission. It is a beautiful place, beautiful region, lots to celebrate, and tremendous history. As you can see here, Petra, we were able to spend a day down there, walked through one of the ancient cities, and fantastic. You look at the level of engineering and innovation that was present there, along with some of the religious and the cultural heritage, truly fantastic. Along with within Amman, a beautiful history, the Roman amphitheater there, the current mosque, King's Mosque here, ornate, intricate, beautiful design. Rainbow Street, a home of great food, great falafel. We had one of the best dinners I can remember at one of the heritage restaurants of Jordanian cuisine from all the different regions. So it was a beautiful experience, very grateful for it. And again, just you need to spend that time. Okay, so to wrap a bow on the key learnings, and then we'll hit the US very briefly for a couple of minutes and get to some questions. These are a summation, perhaps, of what we've just gone through as a whirlwind, and I appreciate I've given you a lot of words and things, so hopefully there's some time to step back and think about it a bit more. Happy to continue the discussion in whatever way. But for me, I think as I spent time on the plane rides and just thinking about it in between the experiences, we are all creators, members, or products of systems. And we look at all these systems in our day-to-day lives that we participate in, and whether it's within our local community, our businesses, education system, more macroeconomic, however broad you want to take it. But you look at these systems and you realize that no system is perfect, truly, but there are ones that work better than others. And how can we, within the scope of our control, the systems that we're able to work within and even better influence, how do we make those as effective as they can be, and look at the way to support the people within them, enable them to be successful in the work that they're doing or their routine tasks that they're doing. And I think that's powerful. That to me is where you can gain a lot of fulfillment at times when there's challenges and things outside of your control. I feel like if only we could fix that system. I agree, but let's look at the system again, truly within our own realm. Also, again, with the people, we're all fundamentally the same, and we should treat each other with a base level of dignity and respect, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or creed. As you can say in current times, likewise in all times, but just the power of that and being able to look at each individual as someone unique. And also the next piece from a leadership standpoint, this was a takeaway from many of the discussions that we had from Mr. Hamazawa, from some of the Toyota learnings, from a couple of other leaders, the power of setting a vision. And that sounds very simple and straightforward, but when you think about the power of that, going into an environment and saying, I have a vision for a couple of years from now or whatever this could look like, and then bringing the team along with you to work towards that, that's powerful. And that's the essence of how to be setting a compelling vision that motivates people to also join forces with you on that journey. Yet again, celebrating the process versus the big time results, whatever. Nothing happens overnight. That's worth doing. And also being willing to say it's not about being the best. It's not about winning every battle that you're fighting. It's about getting better, day-to-day basis, following that discipline, and just celebrating those small improvements and incremental gain versus trying to get to some point that might feel impossible all at once. Culture, I had a unique definition of this. versus the organizational culture you might be familiar with or the geographic culture you might come from. It really is a definition of a series of learned responses. And I love that as how do we respond to problems that come up? How do we respond to new people entering an environment? How do we respond to things in our daily life? Those over time, the way we respond, they tell a powerful story. They teach a lesson to people that are observing it. And it's how do we look at our series of responses to most things, most stimuli we can give a response to, and how do we look at the way that that's forming and shaping the cultures that we work within and that we're influencing as leaders. And it's powerful when you step back and you think, in my system that I'm a steward of, what type of culture am I influencing by the way I react when the phone rings, when a problem comes up, when there's an event that needs my attention? And I think even those small examples are a powerful way to begin to drive that right type of culture you might be working towards. And then always just the overlap of the lean or the continuous improvement principles with life principles and how we can keep building in this little by little, day by day, every day better type of mentality. And I know that's what gives me faith of being able to wake up each morning and think of how can we make today better than yesterday, and not about competing with anybody else or whatever. It's about competing with your own self and making strides in a better direction and having the power of that be very it accrues over time. You can see it in that 1% better each day. All those graphs you see on LinkedIn or whatever, it's real. And that small incremental improvement, the power of these principles. Very good. Less scenic on this one, getting to Dallas, Texas. This is the last stop on the trip, so I'll take a very brief moment here. The reason for this trip was to participate in the FAME National Conference. FAME is the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. John Montanari on the call has been very helpful working with me on eventually getting to the point where we can have a FAME chapter in South Africa. You'd be surprised. We've been on this journey now for over a year. Toyota South Africa, a delegation from Durban was at this conference as well in Dallas, and they were surprised to see me there perhaps, but was able to build a nice bridge and be able to collaborate with them on this journey, along with another large global mining company up in Johannesburg. So we've got a great coalition going in order to get this type of chapter for educating our youth around some of the advanced manufacturing, mechanical, electrical engineering type skills that we're seeing are necessary in the workforce. Toyota sees necessary. Many other sponsor companies see necessary. It's a very powerful concept. It's been around for many years now. I recommend you go check it out, but it really brings all the stakeholders across community, education, government, and business in a way that I have not seen be done better. So I'm excited about it and willing to invest the time and energy to go over to the US and participate and attend, but it's a very small way that I see I can ultimately be part of hopefully building a better system for tomorrow where we live. Toyota Motor North American headquarters in Plano. As I mentioned, $1 billion facility. They have not shied away from any trimming of this facility. It is quite impressive, fantastic to see. We got a nice behind the scenes look at the way they're implementing the TBP. So it's the 8-step problem solving, the PDCA framework that you can either research or you might be familiar with, along with JKK. So this is a unique internal way that Toyota approaches their problem solving. It's their own process, ownership, and completion. They call it standard work on steroids. So it's also, there are some scant resources available, but definitely worth researching and checking out, and more we can share perhaps, but you need to see the way they're applying it. They also had a full exhibit celebrating, or I should say commemorating the 2009 accelerator pedal crisis that Toyota had, the subject of the book Toyota Under Fire you might have read or heard about. And they looked at that as any quality incident we can learn from. And we can learn from a series of problems that gave rise to where that was an organizational crisis for them. And so just you need to see that the way that they educate their new team members on how they responded to it and how they can respond to other potential crises in the future. The last link here is on the Driving Possibilities program. So that is something that fits in very nicely with FAME. It's all the way from a very kindergarten level, young age children, that they're fostering this in at-need communities, supporting children within their school systems, working with them, not just to give a solution, but also to develop the capability of the teachers, the people that are stewards of the right type of system to develop these children in a certain way. So motivating that you now see these things becoming more and more evident. And I'm hopeful that we can have more of that translate to our locales across South Africa and the region. Don't have time to go into this in detail, but I think when I look at FAME and what makes it so unique, and when I look at these lean systems, the goal for this is how do we have a better collaborative system across government, education, civil society, and business. If each of those stakeholders are fully aware and can help define what role they play to create and foster an ideal system, it's powerful when you get the right type of people working together, win, 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 versus the prisoner's dilemma, some people winning, others losing. And I think it'll be a lifetime journey perhaps to continue on this, but it's what motivates me when you get the right people working together and influence the right level of team member involvement. It's powerful. And I always say, what is a good unifying vision that'll actually get everybody on board? And it can't just be financial, it can't just be social, it has to be fully balanced. I have up here the Sustainable Development Goals as one example. That is not a perfect example. I like it because it's well known. People look at that as a nice benchmark, but I think there are better. I think there are other frameworks we could all reference to say, what is a unifying vision that actually brings us all to the table with whatever state we represent there within that map to help solve problems. And I leave this note for us within South Africa. And I know tomorrow is a big day with election day, and we're giving rise to a new chapter in the country. And we're in the middle of what I would say are complicated but optimistic times, hopefully. And it is a beautiful country. I have a heart for it. I know I'm not from here originally, but I've chosen it as a nice background for the good work that can be done using these principles because of all the background and ethnicity and cultural differences, racial differences, social, etc. It is no better world to try to put some of this into practice. And it is frustrating, don't get me wrong, at times. And I've had the privilege to meet with many business leaders here locally. And I really respect the challenges you go through on a day-to-day basis. And the goal is let's keep creating the right type of environment for our people to learn, grow, and develop, change that type of thinking that will ultimately give rise to better outputs and better results. And let's keep that hope as long as we can. So it's exciting to be here with you. Always an honor to be able to share in this environment. Likewise. And let's all keep defining this vision for South Africa, a country with thriving systems across business, education, government, and community order. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be great? But I think our goal, how do we keep moving forward and finding strength across our community? This is one small segment of the community, but even broader. How can we align on identifying some of our critical problems that influence our ability to do business or function well within the system, whatever organization or institution we find ourselves in? And if we can be working together, collaborating a certain way to identify and solve those problems even better. So hopeful for more of those opportunities in the future, and excited for that likewise. So look forward to working towards this vision with all of you. Neat. All right, so a little bit over, but thank you for the patience. Hope it was insightful, educational. For me, I'm still kind of stewing on. Obviously, just got back a couple of days ago, so it's still all sinking in. But these trips, I think, as Sam mentioned in the first bit of the call, powerful to step out of your day-to-day environment to go influence your own thinking. I could see myself kind of getting into a negative viewpoint, and I think it's always nice to say, take a step back, understand what motivates you as an individual leader, and then get back into the ring of helping support others to do that good work also. So motivated me, and excited for hopefully what some of your takeaways were also. But any questions here while we've got a few minutes